Okay, so have you ever stood in the egg aisle at the grocery store and just been like completely overwhelmed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like dozens of cartons and prices all over the place.
Uh-huh.
So are we really just like paying for fancy labels? Or are those expensive eggs actually worth it?
It's a question that I think really brings up a lot more issues than people would think at first.
Yeah.
You think you're just choosing what you're going to have for breakfast,
Right.
but then all of a sudden you're faced with all of these ethical questions, environmental impacts, and even like health priorities. What's important to you?
Yeah. It's so true. It's like this kind of little decision, right? Like, should I spend the extra $2?
Right.
Suddenly has like huge implications.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to go beyond the marketing hype. We're going to look at the science. We're going to look at the economics. We're going to look at the real story behind those pricey eggs.
Yeah. And ultimately, it comes down to you. It's like, what actually matters most to you when you're making food choices?
Right.
What are your priorities?
It's exactly.
They're going to give you all the information so that you can make the best choice for yourself.
Love it. Okay, let's tackle probably the most common assumption, which is about the nutrition.
Okay.
So, are those expensive eggs truly nutritional powerhouses? Are they just packed full of extra vitamins and all the good stuff?
Here's the thing. It's nuanced. So specialized feeds can boost the nutrient content of eggs,
Okay.
but oftentimes it's actually pretty subtle.
Okay.
Like, for example, you have those omega-3 enriched eggs.
Right.
And yeah, they have more omega-3s.
Right.
But you would have to eat so many of them to make a real difference in your intake of omega-3s. It's like you're probably better off just having some salmon with dinner.
Right. Okay. So, not exactly a magic bullet then.
Yeah, not really.
Okay. What about vitamins? Because I see cartons that boast about having higher levels of A, D, and E.
So true. They can have slightly more of those vitamins, but again, you have to look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
Could you get those same nutrients maybe from other healthy foods that are more affordable?
Yeah.
Berries or leafy greens. I mean, those are already really packed with vitamins.
Okay. That's a good point. Yeah, it's all about like relative value, I guess.
Right.
But even conventional eggs, like the ones that are just kind of the basic eggs, they're already pretty nutrient dense, right?
Exactly. They're already packed with protein. They have all the essential amino acids, and they have a bunch of vitamins and minerals in them already. So even like the most basic egg is a really good nutritional choice.
Okay, so maybe the nutritional edge isn't as big as some of the marketing would have us believe.
Oh,
But what about taste? Surely those expensive eggs must taste better.
right.
I mean, chefs rave about those beautiful, rich orange yolks.
Ah, yes. The visual appeal.
Yeah.
Well, those deeper colors are oftentimes linked to things like carotenoids, which can
Oh.
signal a difference in what the hens were fed.
Okay.
But UT, and here's the catch, those pigments, they can also be manipulated by adding certain things to the feed.
Really?
Yeah, like marigold petals.
What?
So you're saying it's kind of like makeup for eggs.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, wow.
They can make the yolks look way more appealing, even if the taste difference is really minimal.
That's so interesting. And I've always thought like those really orange yolks taste so much richer and more flavorful. Are you saying I'm making that up in my head?
Well, it's possible. A lot of people say that they taste richer,
Yeah?
but actually, the blind taste tests, there have been a bunch of them, and the results are kind of all over the place.
Really?
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is our perception of taste, it's really heavily influenced by what we see.
Oh, okay.
So if we believe that something is higher quality, we might actually experience it as tasting better.
That's so wild. So you're saying, like, if I thought a pale yolk came from some fancy heritage breed hen,
Right.
I might actually think that it tasted better, even though it's the same as a less expensive egg.
Yeah, potentially. It just
Yeah.
shows like the power of expectation and how it affects the way we experience things. So I think the question you have to ask yourself is, if you did a blind taste test, would you even be able to tell the difference?
It's a great question. It really makes you wonder if you are paying for the taste alone.
Yeah.
But let's move on to something that's been a big driver, I think, for a lot of consumers, and that is animal welfare.
Okay.
I mean, those images of hens crammed into battery cages were a real wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so too. It sparked outrage, and it led to so many people wanting eggs that come from hens that are raised in more humane conditions.
Right.
But then we get into this confusion with labeling. Cage-free, free range, like, what do all these terms really mean?
Yeah, it gets really tricky.
Yeah.
Because cage-free sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, you think so?
No cages, You assume more space to move around,
Yeah.
but I have a feeling it's probably not that simple.
It's not. It's true that it means there are no cages,
Okay.
but a lot of times what that means is that the hens are just confined to a big barn, and it's
Sure.
really crowded.
Hmm.
They might have perches, nesting boxes,
Okay.
but there's no guarantee that they're going to get any outdoor access.
So even cage-free doesn't mean that those hens actually get to enjoy fresh air and sunshine.
Not always, no.
Okay.
And that's where the free range label comes in.
Right.
But even that term can be misleading because it depends on the regulations,
Right.
which vary, and some of them only require really minimal outdoor access.
Like, what does that even mean?
It could be something like a really small fenced-in area that the hens maybe never even use.
Yeah. So it could just be like basically like a little patch of dirt.
Basically, yeah.
This is where I start to feel like I need like a degree in egg labeling just to go grocery shopping.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Are there any labels that we can actually trust?
Well, that's where the third-party certifications come in.
Okay.
So organizations like Certified Humane or Animal Welfare Approved,
Yeah.
they have stricter standards.
Right.
So they often require a certain amount of space per hen.
Oh,
Genuine outdoor access. And then also things like, perches and dust bathing areas.
so basically things that allow the hens to actually express their natural behaviors.
Exactly. Like be a hen.
Okay. So these certifications are kind of like the gold standard for like ethical egg production.
I would say that they're a good place to start,
Okay.
but it's still a good idea to do a little bit of research.
Yeah.
Look at what each of the certifications requires,
Okay.
and then you can decide if that lines up with what's important to you.
So it's like label detective work.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm ready to put on my deer stalker cap. But here's the thing. All of these improvements that we're talking about for the hens,
Yeah.
the more space, the better conditions, that's got to cost the farmers more, right?
Absolutely. And usually that cost gets passed along to us. So we end up paying more for those eggs.
Right. So are we basically expecting farmers to bear the full cost of better animal welfare? Or should consumers be prepared to share that burden?
I think that's a really great question. And it's a question I think that a lot of people struggle with.
It really does come down to your values and what's important to you.
Yeah.
But this also brings us to, I think, another really important aspect, which is the environmental impact of egg production.
Right.
Because we don't always think about, all of the stuff that goes into our food.
Exactly. Like how much land and water and energy it actually takes to produce a single egg.
Right.
And how do those eco-friendly labels fit into all of that?
So that's a great question. Because the industrial model for producing eggs,
Okay.
it's really focused on efficiency and keeping the prices low.
Right.
But that often means that we're not doing things in a way that's sustainable for the environment. But with the eco-friendly eggs, a lot of times the farmers are approaching things differently.
Okay, so what are some of the things that those farmers are doing differently to make sure that their eggs are actually more eco-friendly?
Well, a lot of them are doing things like rotational grazing to make sure that the soil is healthy,
Okay.
which reduces the need for things like synthetic fertilizers.
Some of them are investing in renewable energy sources,
Right.
like solar and wind power, to reduce their carbon footprint.
Okay.
Even just the feed that they choose for the hens
Yeah.
can make a big difference.
I mean, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine that these practices are cheap to implement.
No, they're not. All those investments cost money, so those higher prices that you see on the eco-friendly egg cartons, they reflect that.
So it's a trade-off, I guess. We're
Mhm.
paying a little bit more, but we're also contributing to a more sustainable system.
Yeah, and I think the really cool thing about this is that it shows how much individual choices can actually make a difference. The more that people demand food that's produced sustainably, the more the market's going to respond.
It's like voting with our dollars.
Totally.
And then as the demand goes up, could that maybe eventually lead to prices going down a little bit?
It could, yeah. It could create economies of scale, which could bring those prices down in the long run.
That's encouraging. I like that. But I do also worry that, those better choices, the ones that are more sustainable, end up becoming something that only certain people can afford.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean then that ethical eating becomes like a luxury for the wealthy?
I mean, I think that's a valid concern. And it speaks to a bigger issue in our food system, which is food equity. Because right now, those premium eggs often represent a trade-off. They are better for the environment, they're better for the hens, but they might not be a realistic choice for people who are on a tight budget. So I think a big question that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we make these better choices more accessible for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it feels like that's a systemic issue.
Yeah.
And one that needs some bigger solutions than just individual consumer choices.
Yeah.
What are some ways that we can try to address that?
So I think there are a couple of things that we can think about. One is that we need to acknowledge that cheap food, it often has hidden costs
Right.
that we're not really accounting for.
Yeah.
Environmental damage, compromised animal welfare,
Well,
potentially even long-term health issues.
Right.
If you really factor in all those things, then it's not really cheap.
Yeah, it's like we're externalizing the true cost.
Exactly. And then the second thing that I think is really important is we need to find ways to make sustainable practices more affordable and accessible for everybody,
Right.
not just, people who have a lot of money.
Right.
And that might mean things like government subsidies for eco-friendly farming or changing our food distribution system so that there's less waste and the transportation costs are lower.
So it sounds like what we really need are solutions that happen on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Individual choices are important,
Mhm.
but we also need corporate responsibility and government policies to really create lasting change.
Absolutely. It's definitely complex.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's so important to understand these issues.
Right.
Because once you understand them, then you can make informed decisions,
Right.
both for yourself and as part of a larger community.
Okay, so we've covered nutrition, taste, animal welfare, environmental impact. This has been a lot. My brain is full.
Lots to think about.
It is. But there's one more thing that I thought of that I think would be helpful to talk about, and that is food safety.
Okay.
So is there a difference in terms of safety when we're talking about cheaper versus more expensive eggs?
That's a really good question.
Yeah?
And it's one that I think people have different opinions on.
Okay.
Because, the risks of contamination, especially from things like salmonella, it really can depend a lot on how the hens are being raised.
Wait, are you saying that some types of eggs are actually safer than others?
I think it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
I mean, there are arguments on both sides.
Okay.
Some experts think that environments that are more controlled, like the large-scale conventional farms,
Right.
they might be better at reducing the risk of contamination
Okay.
because they can minimize exposure to outside things,
Yeah.
like wild birds
Okay.
that could be carrying diseases.
Okay, so like more controlled, less chance of contamination.
Potentially, yeah. But then you have other people who say
Right.
that when you have hens that are raised in free-range or pasture-raised systems,
Okay.
those hens are healthier. They're not as stressed. They have stronger immune systems, which means they're less likely to get sick in the first place.
So a happier hen could actually equal a safer egg.
That's what they're saying.
That's really interesting.
And there is some research showing that things like pasture rotation
Okay.
and giving the hens access to things that they would naturally forage for
Okay.
can help them to have a healthier gut microbiome.
Okay.
And that could make a difference in terms of food safety.
So it sounds like there's not a clear-cut answer to the question of which type of egg is the safest.
No.
It's more about how the hens are being raised.
Yeah, and how healthy they are overall.
Right. And then, of course, it's not just about what's happening on the farm.
Right.
It's about how we handle the eggs at home, too, right?
Exactly. No matter what type of egg you buy,
Okay.
you got to handle them properly and store them properly to make sure they don't get contaminated.
Okay.
So, wash your hands,
Yeah.
keep your eggs in the fridge, cook them thoroughly.
Yep. The basics still apply.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think this all kind of circles back to our original question.
Yeah.
Are expensive eggs worth it? Have we answered that yet?
I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah. It feels like we've gone down like a real rabbit hole with this.
Yeah.
I came in thinking we were just going to be talking about like price,
Yeah.
but now I'm seeing all these connections to like these much bigger issues.
I think that's what's so interesting about this question. It's
Yeah.
like a simple question about expensive eggs,
Right.
but it really gets you thinking about how the choices that we make about food affect so many things.
Right. Not just like our own personal health,
Right.
but also the environment,
Mm.
animal welfare,
Yeah.
even the farmers who are producing the food.
Exactly.
I guess what I'm realizing is that there's no easy answer. There's not like one right choice for everybody.
Right. It's about looking at all the different things and then deciding what's most important to you.
Right. And your own personal situation.
Yeah.
And it's like a process, right? It's not like we figure it out once and then we're done.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as we learn more things,
Right.
our priorities might change.
Right.
And that's okay. I think that the important thing is to just keep learning and keep trying to make choices that are aligned with what you believe in.
For me, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. Like I am going to be looking at those labels
Yeah.
and those certifications way more carefully from now on.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I'm going to be like an egg detective.
You are.
I'm going to have a little magnifying glass.
Put your deer stalker cap on.
Exactly. But I also want to be realistic, right? I can't always afford the most expensive, the most ethically sourced everything.
Right.
Does that mean I'm failing?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I think every choice that you make to be more mindful, it makes a difference.
Okay.
And it's not all on us as individuals either.
Okay.
I think we need to see some bigger changes in the system.
No?
We need policies that support sustainable agriculture.
Okay.
We need to make sure that farmers are getting paid fairly.
Right.
And we need to make sure that people have the information they need to understand these issues and make choices that they feel good about.
So it sounds like we need like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
We need awareness at the individual level, but we also need change at the systemic level.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's a collective effort.
Right.
And I think the more that we have these conversations,
Yeah.
the more that we demand better from the people who are producing our food,
Yeah.
the closer we're going to get to a place where everybody has access to good food.
So it's not about guilt or judgment. It's more about awareness. It's about taking action when we can. And it's about trying to advocate for a better food future for everybody.
Exactly. I think that's a great way to sum it up. So yeah, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Right.
Keep making those choices.
Right.
And hopefully we can all get to a better place with our food system.
I love that. Thanks so much for joining me on this excellent deep dive. I think I learned more than I ever thought I would about eggs.
Me too. It's been fun.
And to all of you listening out there, thanks for cracking open this topic with us. Hopefully you picked up some new insights.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
And we'll catch you on our next deep dive.